In my very first video on YouTube, I built my dream pedal board, and towards the end, I asked you guys what you would do to make it even better. Since then, I've taken some of your suggestions into consideration, and I've made a few changes to the board. Let me show you. So before we get into the actual pedal board, I just want to give you an idea of the rig that we're running through today. The board is plugged directly into the front of my Dr. Z EZG50. There is no effects loop on it. From there, it's going into a Dr. Z brake light attenuator, then into an ISO cab that I built myself in my closet. And in there, we've got a 12-inch Dr. Z Eminence speaker mic'd up with an SM57. Okay, so let's get started with what's underneath the board. The power supply I'm using is a True Tone CS12, and it's able to easily power every pedal on here, even the higher current drawing UA pedals. I can actually even plug in a fourth UA pedal because I use a UA Dream from time to time, and the power supply handles that all no problem. It's not in their marketing material, but if you read the fine print in the manual, you can see that as long as the total draw of your pedals doesn't exceed the maximum current output of the power supply, then you're probably gonna be okay. Also under here, and the very first thing that my guitar goes into, is a TC Electronic Bonafide buffer. Going back topside on the board, the very first pedal we go into out of the buffer is the Origin Effects Cali76 Compact Deluxe. Now this is a compressor based on the famous 1176, and it's what I use as like my always on tone shaping pedal. So because it has a blend knob between the clean and the compressed signal, I actually use it as a combined clean boost as well as compressor. So basically I have the compression set really low because my amp is working pretty hard. I don't really need a ton of compression, but its main job is to kind of beef up single coils. So because I'm playing a Strat 99% of the time, they can sound a little bit thin, and a compressor slash boost does a really good job of kind of sweetening everything, especially preparing it for overdrive pedals later down your chain. So this is what my clean signal sounds like. So the next up after that, we go into the tuner, and normally I would have the tuner before my compressor, but it's more just like for the aesthetic layout of the pedal boards, and it was easier to wire it up this way. So I'm using the Sonic Research Turbo Tuner. I've had this tuner for years, and some people find that it's a little bit hard to read because it kind of works in a circle where people are kind of used to the back and forth, but for me, it just works with my brain the best, so I love it, and I can read it easily on stage when it's kind of bright out. It's just my favorite tuner. Not much else to say about that. From there, we go into the Benson Germanium Fuzz, and this is the first big change from my original board back in February. I found that having that extra overdrive in there was honestly just redundant. It was a slightly different flavor of overdrive, and that was cool, but I just found myself not really using it. So sliding a fuzz in here kind of felt like the right change. And I've always been a fuzz guy. I actually have one of the original like old school Analogman sun faces, the NKT 275 red dot one. It's a really cool pedal, but I could never use it on stage because it just overheated. It was super temperamental, but I managed to find a really good deal on this Benson Germanium Fuzz used on Facebook Marketplace, and it's got a few really cool features where it basically has its own built-in buffer and pickup simulator so that you don't have to worry about placing any pedals before it, and then it's got its own internal heater so it can self-regulate temperature, so you're not going to be dealing with the sound changing or it cutting out because of the temperature fluctuating at a gig or anything like that, which makes it really handy. And then because it's got that internal pickup simulator, it's not really going to work with your volume pot like a normal fuzz would. So instead they've put a control on here called impedance, which basically works as like a reverse volume knob. So as you turn it up, it's going to get that sparkle, but really when I turn a fuzz on, I want it to sound like fuzz, and Germanium Fuzz is just magical. So here's what it sounds like, and I actually leave the compressor on when I'm using the fuzz, especially with the Strat with humbuckers. Maybe I'll turn that compressor off, but it still sounds great. So here it is. So it sounds really huge, and it does stack up with other pedals really well as well downstream, so both upstream and downstream. And the thing about it is it feels like a proper Germanium fuzz. It sounds like a proper Germanium fuzz. There might be better sounding fuzzes out there, but honestly to me this thing sounds outstanding. From there we go into the Analogman King of Tone. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I've talked about it a ton. It's basically just based on a Marshall Bluesbreaker, and the best thing about this pedal is just that it sounds good in every setup. With every guitar, with every amp, it just always sounds great. So I have it set up really simply. I basically just set it up with overdrive on this side, the red side, and then clean boost on this side, which is the yellow side. Without the pedal on, it sounds like this. So yeah, just a great sounding overdrive. On the other side, we've got the clean boost here. So very similar characteristics between the two. The yellow side, the clean boost side, just has a little less compression. Yeah, there's still a little bit of dirt on there. I like to have a little bit of dirt on my clean tone all the time, but there's less compression. So they stack super well. I think that's what makes this pedal so great. So I'll show you kind of in stages. So we've got So next up we got the J Rockett Rockaway Archer, and this is kind of the position where if I'm going to try something new, this is probably where it's going to be. This can kind of be swapped out for other things, but right now I'm using this, and this basically is a combined EQ and Klon. And I've loved the regular Archer for years. I've used it for a very long time as kind of my second favorite overdrive after the KOT, but this one with the EQ kind of lets you have that added flexibility, especially if you want to use it more as a boost. So the way I have it set up here is pretty simple. I have the lows kind of all pulled back, and then I have a mid bump. So the Klon already naturally has a pretty good mid bump, but I find that the bass, specifically on the Archer, to be a little much sometimes. So we pull that back, we bring the mids up, and it works perfectly as like a solo boost. So I have it set up sounding like this. Here's clean. So pretty subtle. The whole point of this is more to be stacked up with either the fuzz or the KOT. So to give you an idea, we've got something like this. And if we really want to have a lot of gain, because I don't really have like a distortion pedal on here, we can stack up all three. It gets a little bit noisy with the single coils. But there is the odd occasion where you do want something like that. And the cool thing is that depending on kind of the amp, like if I'm going to use my Universal Audio Dream instead of the amp, then maybe I'll tweak the EQ settings to be a little bit different so that it kind of fits a little bit better. But ultimately, like I said, this is kind of my flex spot. Right now I'm loving this thing, but something I do want to try here is the Revival Drive from Origin as well. I've heard good things, but I haven't had a chance to try it out yet. Next up from there, we kind of head into our time-based modulation section of the board, which is all Universal Audio. I used to have a Strymon Flint here, and I still absolutely adore that pedal. I know there's a lot of Strymon lovers out there, and maybe some UA haters a little bit, but I needed something a little bit more flexible because I really just was using the Flint as a trem, and I still got a lot of exploring to do here with the Universal Audio Astra, but I think something that's been lacking from my board for a really long time is modulation, and I've never owned a chorus pedal before. Literally the only modulation I've ever had was the tremolo on the Flint. So this has been pretty mind-blowing for me, and like I said, I'm still kind of exploring it and figuring it out, but right now I have one side set to just do chorus, basic chorus, and then the other side set to do that harmonic trem. It does sound different than the Flint. I would actually say I kind of prefer the Flints maybe a little bit, but it does sound great. Okay, so here's the chorus. I like that clean compressed sound combined with chorus. I think it sounds really cool. So like, and then on the other side, we have the trem, so harmonic trem, just like this, nothing crazy. And I've talked about this sound in many videos of mine, but combining that harmonic trem with the fuzz is just extraordinary. Sounds like this. Okay, then out of the Astra, we go into the Starlight. I'm not a huge delay guy. I don't love having a ton of delay. I find it kind of gets in the way of some of the stuff that I try and play. But I have kind of fallen in love with the sound of analog delay, and this does a really good Deluxe Memory Man kind of style thing where you still get the tap tempo. So these are the settings that I like to use, and then I set it to a dotted eighth note. I find like giving it a rhythmic quality that's a little bit more complex than the simple like quarter note or eighth note. Just to me, it sounds more interesting. If you're gonna have delay on, you might as well have it there. So this is what I like it to sound like. This pedal does function as one other thing for me, and that's kind of like a late stage boost. When you set the Starlight to the tape or the analog settings, you actually get a preamp from this color knob here, so it's not really a tone control, it's a preamp. And when you bypass the pedal, you can turn this on in the app. When the pedal's bypassed, you can kind of keep this engaged, this preamp. So I actually am using it quite heavily, so if you listen, if I turn it down, deadens right away, right? So and if I bring it way up, it's actually a great sounding overdrive, especially for something that's digital. But I just kind of set it part way up just so it's pushing a little bit. I find like the combination of the buffer going into the Origin Cali76 and then also getting here, kind of sandwiching everything in between, gives you a really nice balance, and especially with the single coils on the Strat, sounds really good. And then last up from there, we go into the Golden, which is doing all of my reverbs. This amp does have spring reverb. It's got a real spring reverb tank, but when you're on stage and stuff, if something bumps it or you move around, it makes those super annoying noises, which do come through the microphone if it's mic'd. So I like to use an actual reverb pedal, and the Golden just sounds, honestly sounds better than a real spring reverb tank, if that can even be possible. But yeah, it's been on this whole time, so we just have very, very simple spring settings. And if I turned it off, you'd notice right away. So with it on, ooh, that's weird. I don't like that. That almost sends shivers up my spine. I really like to make sure there's a little bit of that room ambience in there. So that is just the spring setting. I think I have it set to smooth. The mix is super low. The decay is off all the way. So minimal, but listen how splashy that is. I never turn that off. I leave that on 100% of the time. The only time it's off is when I'm using a different preset on the Golden. I do have a plate set up here too, which is a little bit more noticeable. It's quite bright, shimmery. I kind of use it more for ambient stuff, so like this type of stuff. And then obviously, I'm not always using these by themselves. I'm usually pairing stuff up. So if I'm using like the delay along with this plate, I believe it's plate B. If you're looking for the actual setting inside the Golden, I'm using plate B. And then with the Astra, maybe we add some of this. And that's it. I like small pedal boards. I like that every single pedal has a very specific use. There's minimal overlap. Everything's very efficient. And if there's something on the board that I don't feel like I'm gonna turn on every time I play it, then I don't really want it on there. As I said in my original pedal board video, I kind of want this pedal board to feel like an extension of my amp. I have so much respect for players like Derek Trucks who play with no pedals at all, and really that's not realistic for me, but this is kind of like the next best thing. If you do play with a bigger pedal board, I'd encourage you to kind of try and shrink it down and see if it changes the way that you play. I found that less pedals really helps you to get more out of each individual pedal. So I'll ask you again, what can make this pedal board even better? What would you change? What would you add? What would you take away to make it perfect? Please Please share your thoughts in the comments below because I'd really like to know. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I upload a new guitar video every single week. And I just want to say a really big thank you for hanging out with me and watching the whole video, and I'll see you in the next one.